Hey guys, Frosty Knives here, back with another book review. And one of the things that I enjoy doing that has come to my attention by rereading these Stephen King novels and getting back into that over again is that it really puts into perspective what I like about Stephen King, what I don't like about Stephen King, and which books wind up in my top tier of King books and which books wind up in my bottom tier. And today we are going to be reviewing what has worked its way into my number 3 favorite Stephen King book of all time, and we are going to be talking about Stephen King's Christine, a book we have not talked about yet. So let's run through the particulars. Christine was published in 1983, and my copy clocks in paperback at 503 pages. I just want to say, as a side note, a lot of people have been commenting on page counts. They'll watch my videos and they will say something to the effect of, or they'll leave a comment about, my copy has more pages. My copy has less pages. My copy doesn't have the same amount of pages as your book does. That is a publishing thing. Based on whatever edition that you have, based on whether it is a paperback, a hardcover, a first printing, a 20th printing, what size it is, what type font it is, this is very much a situation of your mileage may vary. Your book may not have the same amount of pages as my book. That's just a thing, and I've been meaning to make that comment in the comment section of my videos, but I never did, so I thought I would address it here. If you have this book, this copy, this edition, in particular, it's going to be 503 pages. But again, it's a case of your mileage may vary on the page count, based on what edition you have, when it was published, how it was published, and where it was published. So that's how that goes. But anyway, back to Christine. So Christine, at its heart, is a story about a love triangle. A love triangle between a boy, his car, and his girlfriend. In that order. So we have the story of Arnie Cunningham and his best friend, Dennis Gilder. And Arnie is a loser, as Dennis likes to remind us throughout the book. That Arnie is a loser. He's not very popular. He's bullied at school. He has overprotective parents. He's, to use Dennis's words, a loser. And Arnie comes across a 1958 Plymouth Fury for sale on the lawn of one Roland D. LeBay. And he falls in love with it, and he has to have it, and he buys it so that he can fix it up. And so that begins the slow, inexorable build of Arnie being obsessed and addicted to his car, and how this obsession and this addiction to his car slowly takes over his life, slowly takes over his personality, slowly takes over his mind. And then we begin to see the transformation of Christine from a 1958 Plymouth Fury as this car begins to take on a personality and a life and a mind of its own. And eventually, Christine becomes alive, to use a lack of a better term. And then Christine begins to take over Arnie and take over Arnie's life. And eventually Christine begins to deal with the things and the people that have started to cross Arnie and that have started to cross her. And so eventually, so we see this transformation of Christine from this wrecked out vehicle to a murderous death machine. And I have been accused of giving too much away in my reviews, so that is all the story that I'm going to give you. You may be familiar with the story of Christine. You may have read it. You may have watched the very good John Carpenter adaptation of a movie of the book. But that's all I'm going to tell you. Other than, it is one hell of a read. It is a very good read, and I have always said that when Stephen King works with a smaller cast, with a smaller focus, with a smaller story, I think that's when he does some of his best work. And he does some of his best work, I believe, in Christine. There are 3 main characters, 4 if you count the car: Arnie Cunningham, his best friend Dennis Gilder, and his eventual girlfriend Lee Cabot. And there are some supporting characters around those people and things, but that is the main focus of the story. And they are extremely well fleshed out. They are extremely well described and presented to us. The book takes place, it's Dennis telling the story. Dennis is telling the story of what happened. So this is all from Dennis's point of view, even though the book shifts perspective. There are 3 acts. Act 1 is in first person. Act 2 is in third person. And Act 3 is back into first person. It's a little bit of a jarring shift, but it's a necessary shift based on what happens in the story. However, the entire story is completely Dennis's tale, and he's telling the story of his best friend and his best friend's car and his best friend's girlfriend, and how everything falls apart and goes to hell at the end. So the characters are very well done. The tension is very well done. The pacing is very well done. It starts out in September of a school year, and then it ratchets up to winter break. And we get that slow crawl, right? That slow, ponderous, methodical crawl as school is winding up to winter break, as winter begins to come in, as winter is winding up to its snowiest peak, and as Christine winds up to her most murderous, until finally we get to the very end. And I want to show you guys something. I want to show you something right here. This right here. Right here. Hold on one second. Okay. This is how much book time King devotes to the actual final confrontation with Christine. This is how much time it takes to actually deal with Christine. Everything before it is build up. And the build up is so well done. The tension so well paced. Everything so well described and ratcheted that this is the that little bit is the final blow off, the climax, the final denouement of this murderous rampage that we've been reading about for 470 pages. And the payoff is good. The ending is good. The ending, the way that the book does not end on a happy ending, but it ends on an ending that needs to happen. And I have been very critical, and you know this. I've always been very critical of the way King has ended some books. I've always said that in some books, in some of his situations, the endings fell flat. Well, this is not one of them. The ending does not fall flat in this book. It ends the way it needs to end, and I think it's done very well from beginning to the final conclusion. There are a couple of things in here that, I think may not have shaken out, I think, as good as King may have intended them. One of them is the relationship between Dennis and Arnie. Now, Dennis and Arnie are supposed to be best friends, and at the end of the book, Dennis is going to be dealing with the loss of this friendship with Arnie, and all the things that he'd grown up with, and all the things that he and Arnie had done, and this friendship and this bond that he has created. It's supposed to have this emotional impact that he's losing everything that he had with his best friend. Unfortunately, the way I've read it and the way I've looked at it and the way it's presented to us, it's very much kind of presented in a way that Arnie and Dennis weren't so much best friends, really. It's presented in a way as Dennis pitied Arnie, right? Arnie was a loser. That's almost the page 2 or 3 that he talks about. This is how he introduces Arnie to us. Arnie is a loser. This is his words. This is what he says. Arnie is a loser, and it's almost like a national law that every high school has to have too. Somebody's dumping ground, and that's Arnie. And it almost feels like the relationship between them is not a close bond, but more of Dennis pitying Arnie. And Dennis somehow trying to elevate Arnie out of his station in life up to Dennis's station in life, which is a popular or at least non-bullied station, simply by associating with Arnie, right? That if I can associate with you, I'll bring you out of the trenches, I'll drag you out of the mud, just because you're being associated with me, popular football man of high school. It even goes so far as to say and to debate during various sections of the book that maybe I should just walk away from Arnie. Maybe I should let him fall. Maybe I should let him fail. I am tired of saving Arnie's life. I am tired of constantly bringing him out of the muck. And so because you have that sort of dichotomy between the two, there isn't as much of an emotional resonance at the end of the book. It isn't so much that at the end that Dennis is losing his best friend to this evil car, and we feel bad about that, and we feel bad for Dennis. It feels more of like a relief. Like Dennis is finally having a reprieve. He no longer has to save Arnie. Arnie has been taken care of, and now Dennis can move on with his life. That's the way that I read it. That's my takeaway from it. Your takeaway from it may be different, but that's how I read it. And so I don't think the emotional impact at the end of the book is where King wanted it to be. But it makes sense. It makes sense. And I'm not going to knock the book for that, because I still think it's one hell of a read. The characters are well fleshed out. Everything that they do makes sense and is logical, and the progression of it is good. This is a book about obsession, right? This is a book about obsession and addiction. And this is a theme that Stephen King, especially in his early canon of work, I'm going to say prior to Tommyknockers and Back, or prior to Dreamcatcher and Back, Stephen King writes a lot about obsessions. He writes a lot about addiction. He writes a lot about obsessions, right? From Jack Torrance in The Shining, to Annie Wilkes in Misery, to Artie Cunningham, right, in Christine, to Roland Deschain in The Dark Tower, whose entire life is based on obsessions. King writes a lot about obsession and addiction, and how it can twist you, how it can turn you, how it can change you from something you are into something you are, how it can make you do things, and how it can twist you and pervert you, and the way that obsessions and addiction can just rule and ruin somebody. Stephen King, the man, knows a lot about addiction and a lot about obsession, especially in his early life, where he has personal demons and he has personal problems with his own obsession. So this concept of being obsessed and how obsession, or as he likes to put it in this book, his single-minded purpose, his unending fury, his single-minded purpose, right? That's what drives Arnie. That's what drives Roland LeBay. That's what eventually drives Arnie. His single-minded purpose, his obsession. King writes a lot about that. A lot of his books revolve around that theme, because that's something that Stephen King knows. He knows it well. He knows it very intimately. He knows how it can be. He knows how it can bring you to the heights of creativity and the depths of despair, how it can make you and elevate you, or how it can ruin you and break you. And King knows a lot about that. And we get a lot of that theme in a lot of his early literature, in his early works. And so here it is again, his single-minded purpose, Arnie and Christine. This is a really great book, and it really having reread it again and not having read it in a long time, I quickly realized that this is my third favorite Stephen King book. It, Pet Sematary, and Christine. Christine is so well done, and he does such a great job of breathing life into this thing, right? Into this mechanical monstrosity. He does a great job of breathing life into Christine. He has a knack for taking something that is mundane. A St. Bernard, 1958 Plymouth Fury, a hotel, taking something that's mundane and ordinary and normal and injecting it with enough of its own life and its own purpose and its own spark to turn it into something truly horrifying. And he has done that with Christine. A lot of people think it may be a little pulpy, but at the end, there is this murderous death car with a mind of its own, and you really believe that this is something that could happen, and that it has its own purpose, and it has its own instinct and intelligence, and it can do its own thing, and that it is something that needs to be killed, not destroyed, not taken apart. Christine is something that needs to be killed, and we say that, right? On some level, King, I think, wanted to explore how people become infatuated with their cars, how they can obsess over their cars, giving their cars names, calling their cars by pronouns. Instead of calling it an it, you call it a her. In this case, a her or a him. You give it a pronoun. You give it gender. You give it a name. You instill it with a life of its own. And he took this idea of people who obsess over their cars and who do that to their cars and who anthropomorphize their cars, and he took it to the nth degree, right? And in Stephen King fashion, he took it to the nth murderous degree. And this is the absolute murderous end result of somebody who does that with their car. This is an awesome book. I believe I gave it a 5 out of 5 on Goodreads. It is well worth your time. It is well worth picking it up, reading it. You're going to devour it because it's a quick read, even though it's 503 pages long. I did it in a week. I think it was about a week. Once it gets rolling, just like Christine, once it gets rolling, it's almost unstoppable. It's hard. Once those 2,000 tons of rolling iron starts running down the road at you, it almost becomes impossible to stop and avoid. That is Christine. I would really like to know why he chose the name Christine. You know, why not another name? I guess it'd be weird if we were talking about a book named Madeline or Agatha or Timothy, Stephen King's Timothy. But I'm not sure why he picked the name Christine, but it seems to work. So that is my review, guys, of Stephen King's Christine. I'm glad you like these book reviews. I'm glad you enjoy watching these book reviews and listening to an old man ramble on about his books and about stories and whatnot. So if you can, give it a like, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the little notification button, share it around, tell your friends, tell your enemies, and as always, I will see you in the next video.